All right, you are welcome to this class on HTML. We are looking at HTML tables. In our previous class, we saw HTML images, and we'll see the fact that there's virtually no website you will visit that doesn't have an image in it. In fact, from that class, we understand that an image speaks more volume than even thousands of texts, and that with just a single image at times, you convey a lot of message that users will not even forget after they have visited your website. So today we are looking at HTML tables. And when we say table, HTML table, what do they mean? What does it mean? Actually, when you present information on a web page and you have what we call tabula, I don't know, but by now I know you should be conversant with tabula, because in science and some other subjects we have what we call tabular representation of information and something like that. The same thing you do there is what we are trying to do in HTML tables. Assuming you want to have a tabular representation of plants and their botanical name, or a tabular representation of animals and their botanical name. So you can have a table that has a column. The column is the vertical representation of what we call the table, and the row is the horizontal representation of what we call the table. So you can have a vertical column, the first one, representing maybe, let's say, a serial number, numbering the animals, numbering the plants, and then the second column now the names of the plant or the animal, and the third column we have the name, the botanical name of the animal or the plant. So that's a table. So when we want to represent such an information in HTML, we make use of the HTML table. Like what we have in front of us right now, we have an HTML table that has company names, the contact person in that company, and the country where that company is located. Like if you look at it very well, we'll see Alfred's food taskis. It's the contact person in that company is Maria Anders, and the company is in Germany. So this is what we call an HTML table. So anytime we need to represent information on our web page in a tabular form, we make use of the HTML table. So an HTML table, how do we define it? We use the tag table, the table tag. And by now I want to believe that when I say tag, when I mention an HTML tag, you should know that when you want to type out or write that tag, you have a less than sign, then the word, then a greater than sign. And when the tag is a pair tag, that is, it has a closing tag, then you have a less than sign, forward slash, the tag name, and then the greater than sign, completing the tag. And I also have told you before now that we have tags that are self-closing, meaning they don't come in pair. So when you write such tag, you have a less than sign, the tag name, then the forward slash, and then the greater than sign. So I won't be saying that anymore. So the table tag is used to introduce our table. To create a table on your HTML page, you use the table tag. Now the table tag has children, and those children work together with the table tag to create our table. You can't just say table tag, open and close table tag, and put your contents. If you do that, you wouldn't have a table yet. So the table has what we call children that must be used alongside with the table tag to create a table. One such children is the table head that we call T-head. So when you create a table tag, then inside the table tag you have the table head. The tag is T-head, and then we have the T body, which is the table body. So we add the two so that we can have what we call the heading of the table and the body of the table. Those two are the main children of the table tag. But the truth of the matter is that they could be discarded, meaning you may choose not to use them. But to make your HTML table HTML5 compliant and easy to control in JavaScript, it is good to have the T-head and the T-body. Now, the T-head also has children. So, the T-head and the T-body are siblings. They are children of the table tag. Now, the T-head is also having children, the TR, meaning table row. The TR tag, meaning table row. And now when you are in the head region, in the T-head, you have a TR, the table row tag, and inside the table row tag also has children. The children there, they are the table heading, TH. The table heading, TH. So now in the body region, the T row, table row, has children, table heading, TH. So when you are creating a table, you have the table tag. Inside the table tag, you have the T-head. And inside the T-head, you have the TR, table row. And inside table row, you now have the T-heading. Now, the number of T-heading, the TH, the table heading, that you have in your T row determines how many columns you are going to have in the head region of your table. So, now, when we now come to the table body, the table body also has a child TR. And the child TR of the table body also has children TD, table cell. It's called table cell, but it uses the tag TD. So the TD are similar to the TH in the head, in the table head. The TD in the table body, they are similar to the TH in the table head, because they also specify the number of columns that the table body is going to have. Now, a caution. If you have, for instance, 3 T-head in the head, in the T, in TH in the T-head, and you are having 2 TD in the table body, then your HTML table will be scattered, because it is expected that the number of column in the head should be the same thing as the number of column in the body. But there are sometimes when you actually needed to do some representation and you needed to span across cell. In that case, we have what we call a code span attribute for either your TH or your TD. So that means you are creating an HTML table like the one we have in front of us right now, and in the head we are having 3 columns as we have it here. Now you notice that in the body we are having 3 columns as well, so that each TR is representing the rows in that table. Now if we have a look at the result of this, you see that we have a 3-column table properly laid out. Now what I was saying in essence is this, that let's assume the 3rd row that has John Doe AT, we want to link the first name and the last name column together. So we use what we call a code span attribute. The code span attribute could be used in both the body and the head. So when you have that defined, so it will make one of your column to span across 2 columns, and in that particular row you can't again have the number of column that other rows has, otherwise your table will scatter again. So now I've done that. Let's run this and see the output. If you looked at it, you see that the last column, the last name column for the 3rd row is no longer there. Why? Because the first column is now spanning across the first and the second column. So we use the code span to achieve that. Then in some other cases also, you want a particular row to cut across 2-3 rows, a particular column I mean, to cut across 2-3 rows. What do you do in that case? In that regard, you do what we call a row span. When we did the code span, we said code span 2. It means this one particular column should take the size of 2 columns. So when we are doing row span as well, you specify the number of rows you want your column to span across. For instance, if I go back to the first row that has Jill Smith 50, and then I tell the Jill column to do a row span, and I say 3. Now, I will have to deliberately remove the first columns of the other rows, so that particular column that has Jill can span across the entire columns. If you look at it now, you see that the first column is having only Jill, then we have our second column normally and our third column normally. The reason is because the first column has been asked to span across the 3 rows of our table. So now I mentioned something in the introduction, that when we are working with our HTML table, we can discard the T head and the T body and just create our rows directly inside the table tag, just as we have it in the one that we have tested now. Now, this will work very fine, but if you want your HTML table to be HTML5 compliant and to be easily controlled with JavaScript, then you should have your T head and your T body, dividing your table into the head and the body separately. And that will allow you to create what we call a scrollable table, where your heading will remain static, not moving, and the remaining parts of the table can scroll for as many rows as possible. So, but if you don't do that, if you just create your rows directly in the table tag, that will not be possible, or that will require a lot of work to accomplish. But if you have divided it into T head and T body, it will be easy to accomplish. So our table is the table tag. The table tag has 2 main children, the T head and the T body, and each of the T head and the T body has another child, the table row, and the table row has children, the TD for the body section and the TH, the table heading, for the head region. Now, when we create HTML tables, normally the HTML table will not show us the borders if we did not specify we needed a border for it. Now, when you specify border for your table, let's just try it out. Now, I will go to the table tag, and I will say border, and I will say it's equal to 1. So when we do that, let's run it. Okay, you see what we have? So we have a border that has some space in between. And I can remember in the olden days, around when internet first came, when you visit most websites that has table on them, this is how their table appears. So, and then you'll be wondering, the table, how is it? Well, that is how the HTML table tag with the border attribute is interpreted. So, but you will be wondering, okay, you want to have a table that looks like something you can see in your textbook normally. You just have a black line around the cells and the table, and everything is just very fine. It's not having space in between. So to do something like that, we have the border collapse attribute. And the border collapse attribute is actually a CSS defined rule that can be applied to our table, so that the table will not be having space in its border, but instead it will be a solid line around the table. So let's look at this sample we have right here. Do you see that? This is now because the table border collapse is now defined, and we have a CSS that is defining our table property and appearance. So now, instead of adding the attribute in the table tag, we now have it as a CSS definition. And we said border 1 pixel solid black. So solid is saying it should be a solid line, and black is saying it should be a black color. And the border collapse is what makes everything to fitly join together. So let's try out something. Let's assume I remove the border collapse. I remove it from the CSS definition, and I'll run our code again. Do you see that we went back to what we were having before? So now if we bring back the border collapse, colon collapse, and we run that. Oh, sorry, I missed the spelling of collapse. Okay, let's go for that thing again. It's like the spelling is still not okay. Oh, I was using one L instead of double L. So now you have the table with the border now collapse. So that is how to accomplish that. Now, the other things we also can see is that just as you can align the content of almost every other HTML tag, we can also align the contents of our table cells. And by default, by the specification of the W3 consortium, the TH cell, table cell in the head region has its content aligned to the center by default. So you don't need to bother your head with it. Once you define the table cell in the head region as TH, the text number one will be thickened more than the remaining part of the body, and it will be center aligned. But should in case you needed it to be left aligned or right aligned, then you need to create a CSS rule to undo that. And in the body region, the contents are by default in the TD table cell. The content are by default left aligned, meaning that if you want it to be centered or to be right aligned, you need to write a CSS rule to undo that. So then another thing we can see, we have talked about col span and row span, and okay, let's look at caption. Caption is not commonly used for table cell, because you can of course create your table and put another tag before the table to put your table caption. But in the case where you want the caption to be part of your table, you can define it as we have it right here, that the caption is right inside the table tag, not outside the table tag. So the caption is introduced with the caption tag, and the caption tag is not peculiar to the table tag. You can of course use it in every other table that you so desire to, in every other HTML tag that you so desire to have it. A caption is just normally for caption purpose, to create a text that identify with that HTML tag. And so you can use the caption tag with your HTML. And when you want to have a control over your table, let's assume you have so many tables in your web application, and you want to be able to refer to each of them specifically, then you must assign the ID attribute to your table tag. The ID attribute to your table tag will allow you to be able to pick on that particular table, either in your CSS rule, or when you are writing JavaScript to control your table, the ID tag will enable you to pick on your specific table. And then we have what we call the styling pseudo class that you can use to identify or highlight or select some specific rows or table or cell or column of your table tag. And the empty child pseudo class, a CSS pseudo class, is not only peculiar to the table tag. You can use it for every HTML tag when you need to write a CSS rule that is applicable to some elements on your page that has a particular attribute in common, and you want them to, for instance, let's assume you have so many span tag on your page, and some of them are always in a particular position, and you want all of them to have a particular property. Then you can use the end-child pseudo CSS pseudo class to control that. So let's see the output of this particular one. You see that? So now the first table does not have anything in particular about the pseudo class we are talking about. But if you look at the second table, you see that the first row has a black background, then the second row has a gray background, and the third row has a gray background. If you come back to the CSS, you will see that we have a CSS pseudo class, the end-child even, that apply a gray background to our table, with the ID T01. So now T01, then you are now picking the rows, and you are now applying the background to only the childs of the table tag that is in the even rows. That is, when you start counting your row from row 1, you have row 2, row 3, row 4. So the CSS will only be applied to only those ones that are in even positions. That is position 2, position 4, position 6, position 8, and on like that. If you look at the second CSS rule, it's applying to those that are in odd position. That is from position 1 to position 2 and on like that. So that is the end-child CSS pseudo class, and now it applies to our HTML table. So in summary, we have seen the HTML table tag, the fact that we need to use it to create HTML to create table on our web page, and we have mentioned that the HTML table tag has two main child, the T-head and the T-body, and that the TR is the table row that is also a child for both the T-head and the T-body, and that the TH is the child of the T-head in the T row, and that the TD is the child of the TR, the table row, in the T-body. Also, I mentioned that the T-head and the T-body can be discarded, and so we can have the TR, the table row, directly inside our table tag. But for compliance sake, for HTML5 compliancy, and for ease of control, it is advisable to have your T-head and your T-body right inside the table tag, and the role inside each of them as you want it to be. We saw the border for dividing the border around your table. We saw how useful the border collapse CSS class could be. Then we looked at the text align. We saw the close span that allow us to create a cell that can span across 2, 3, 4, 5 other columns. We see the row span that enable us to create a cell that can span across 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, and the ID attributes that allow us to pick on a particular table for a greater perfect control. So we also saw the caption tag that allow us to add a caption to our table. And I mentioned that the caption tag is not peculiar to our table. It could be used for every other HTML tag. So with this, we have come to the end of HTML table. And as in conclusion, the coming week, instead of our normal class, we're going to be having a project. Already I've mentioned the project at the end of our class on images. And so what's the project again? This is a very compulsory project that must be submitted. So now what we want to do is this. We want to create what we call a family photo book as a web page. So what you are going to do is that you are going to take pictures of your family member. The first one must be a picture that contains every family member, mommy, daddy, yourself, and your siblings. So that will be the very first page of your web application. And on top of it, you give it an heading. Let's assume your surname is Oguntade. You say Oguntade family. And then you have the picture, the family picture, a big one on that page. Now, from that page, now you now create links to the various other pages of every family member, starting with daddy, mommy, and your siblings and yourself. Now, when you get to the page for daddy, you have daddy's picture only and a brief information about daddy. Then when you get to the page of mommy, you have mommy picture only and a link to and a brief information about mommy, and you will do that for every other of your sibling and for yourself. So with that, you will put into practice everything we have learned so far. Thank you very much. God bless you. I will see you in the next class. Goodbye for now.